And with that, Tom, I'll have you introduce Josh, and we'll hear from Josh for the next 20, 25 minutes, and then we'll hear from Julie a little bit.
All right. Well, we are very blessed to have Josh Kalinowski join us today. I can remember as a kid, the buzz around Casper was definitely in the sports world, fixated on Josh. He's a great role model, great leader in every sport that he played, and has had a remarkable career. Went on to play professional baseball for a while, and now is absolutely killing it in the real estate market here in Casper and in the Rocky Mountain region. And so we're very lucky to have his perspective on leadership and on what's going on in Wyoming, and really excited to hear what he has to say. So Josh, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thank you so much, man. Well, I will tell you, definitely flattered by that introduction. And I would say that it's not all the reality. It sounds fantastic and it sounds amazing, but I just want to let you know, there's a lot of things that go in behind all of that. But yes, very fortunate, very blessed, not only to have been, had the opportunity to be raised here in Casper, but then also to chase my dream for a while, which was to play baseball. So I'm so excited, first of all, to be here. Thank you so much, Tom, Mandy. This is awesome to be here. I've had the opportunity to speak with Lyft over the last couple of years, and it has just been, it's been so good to go back to the youth and see the youth and see where they're at, and really and help them and inspire them to chase the dreams that I got to chase as a young man. And to be honest with you, I'm still chasing my dreams. They just have changed over the years. I'm really excited to talk today. I literally was giving this talk earlier this week to the agents that we have here in our companies and our leadership that we have in our companies. And I'm sure, like many of you, whether you're a teacher or whether you're a student, a teenager, right now, you're feeling some type of level of fear in your life, right? There's some anxiety and some stress that you're like, man, I'm not used to this. And we're all having to deal with fear in our lives in different levels, right? And so I'm going to share my screen here so you guys can see my presentation. I'm going to start this here. I'll pull this up. Hopefully somewhere, wherever that's at.
It's just really reassuring to see someone else's desktop who looks like mine. So thanks for that. That was a real bright spot in my day.
I got rid of a lot of pictures, a lot of screenshots around there. Okay, so can everybody see my screen? Everybody's good?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I just want to talk to you guys about, like, well, how do we overcome this four-letter word that we're all faced with? Like, at every level of our life, we're all going to be faced with this word, and it's a challenging word, right? I love this tag right here. Hello, my name is fear, because so many of us, like, it kind of comes uninvited, right? Nobody really loves to have fear come into their lives, especially when it's involuntary. But we know that, especially in this time right now, like, a lot of us are just faced with that. We're faced with fear. I came across this. This is something that I posted in our office over the last couple of years, but I love this acronym to fear. Fear is forget everything and run, which I don't know about you, but I know that I've done that a time or two in my life. Or hopefully you get to this point in your life where you face everything and rise. And we are left with a choice, right? As things are being challenged in front of us every single day, and as new technology and in new ways of learning and new restrictions and all this stuff, we will get some level of anxiety and fear in our life that we either have to forget everything and run away from it, or we're gonna have to face everything and eventually rise from it. I love this, that I am stronger than my fears. And I don't know about you, but most of the time, like growing up, I didn't feel very strong. I most certainly was not prepared for some of the challenges that I was faced with when I was growing up as a teenager, as a young man, as a man chasing his dreams. You know, the fear and the anxiety of the unknown, or that uncertainty in my life, could be very overwhelming. And it actually would, feel like this 15,000-pound elephant on my chest, and it would paralyze me at times. And I imagine a lot of you are sometimes feeling that way right now with all of the uncertainty that's kind of going on in life and in the world, and especially with social media, we can really get caught up in what the fear of other people are thinking, and we can really take ownership of that. And so as you're thinking of it, I want you to get this concept that, fear can happen in all forms of our life, right? Right now, you're probably going through fear. For those of you that are athletes, the fear of like no sports or when you're going to have those sports again. If you're a thespian and you have events that are coming up, if you're just into activities, the fear of not knowing when those will come again can be very paralyzing. And the disappointment in the past because they were maybe taken away when a time that you didn't make the choice for them to be taken away can bring some fear and anxiety into your life. No graduation. We think of all those seniors right now that they don't get the opportunity to graduate like they did in the past, even though they still will graduate. They don't get to celebrate like they did in the past or what people have remembered. The fear of maybe, listen, are they going to have scholarships for me when I go to college? Are there going to be jobs when I graduate? Hey, listen, I have a summer job that I usually go to. And the fear of that unknown can really be a challenge. The fear of a different future. And we all are faced with uncertainty to a certain point in our lives. And how do we overcome that? How do we identify this fear, and how do we best handle it and when we're challenged by it? The beautiful thing about fear is that when you run to it, it actually runs away. And I know that's an interesting concept. And for those of you that maybe haven't run into fear in your life, you're kind of wondering, like, is that really true? Or is that just a really nice saying? I will tell you from personal experience, as I have grown to challenge myself to face the fears in my life, it is absolutely true. It's absolutely true that when you run to it, and sometimes you walk, sometimes you crawl, sometimes it's 1 inch at a time as you face those fears, the fears will actually dissipate. The fears will actually go away. And I know that's tough because I don't know about you, but I've got a lot of voices in my head. I've got a lot of stories that I like to tell myself, right? And one thing that we need to understand about the voices in our head is that the fear is a reaction. Right? The fear is a reaction of an event. The fear is the reaction of a story that we said to ourselves. Fear is the reaction of a post that we read, or something that we read on social media, or maybe a conversation that we overheard, or maybe something that's about to happen and we don't know how it's going to come. But courage is a decision. And right now you are having to kind of muster up courage. And here's the one thing I want to tell you all about courage. Each and every one of you have it. Like, each and every one of you have courage inside of you. Now, you might not have discovered it fully yet, and you might not have actually taken ownership of that courage that you have within you, or grown it to the level that you need it, but we all have courage inside of us. And so sometimes the fear, as we walk through it, it won't go away. There's things in your life that you're gonna have to make decisions on, right? As teenagers, every year you're going to be making a decision for your future. And you're going to have to step into that fear. And it's not necessarily it's not going to be easy, and it's definitely not going to go away. So you might have to go into that next opportunity in your life a little bit afraid. But know that the courage that you have, the courage that you're going to develop, is going to help you walk, even though you are afraid of what you're about to experience. And the understanding of this is really important too, is that if we don't face our fears, when you decide not to actually rise up and actually move forward to them, if we avoid them, which is often very easy to do in our lives, they become our limits. Has there been a time in your life that maybe you could identify right now because of a past experience, right now because you avoided making or taking that challenge or that decision or having that conversation? It's somehow now become a limit and a limitation in your life. As you talk to your teachers, and if you talk to your parents, and if you talk to adults around you, you'll all find that each and every one of us have formed limitations in our life because of the fear and the fears that we weren't able to tackle. So I will tell you this, as a teenager, be prepared. The fear is never going to go away. You'll never get rid of fear in your life, especially if you desire to do something amazing with your life. You'll always be challenged with it. But here's what I can promise you, is that the courage that you obtain in your life, the courage that you discover in your life will grow so much bigger than the fear that you'll face, that you'll be having the ability to attack it every single day. I love this last one, and I don't really like to get very spiritual in my talks by any means, but this is a personal one for me. When I came across this, it said that God can even use the ashes from our worst choices to make something good. And the reason why this was so important for me to write there is because I will tell you guys from personal experiences, there were a lot of things in my life that became the ashes. They became the regrets. They became the decisions that I made that weren't really the best decisions in my life. You know, Tom alluded a little bit earlier about the fact that I was able to chase my dream and became a professional baseball player. But what he didn't say is that I never got to fulfill the ultimate dream of having a career in baseball. And baseball became one of the ashes in my life. And every time I looked at my past and my career, it became the resemblance of the limitations that I never wanted to see again. It became the past of my life that I wanted to avoid for so many years. But then they were able to become something really good in my life. And I was able to see all of the things that happened in my past, all the bad things that happened in my past, all the things that I questioned in my past, and why they have set me up for something really amazing and really good for my future. And it will happen to you as well too. Everything that you're going through, all of the experiences that you're about to go through, all the experiences that you have gone through, if you understand that everything is happening for you and not to you, your ashes will be turning into something amazing for your life. So how do we face the fear? Right? How do we face the fear that's in our life? We've given you what the identity looks like. We've given you what the challenges could be. But if we didn't actually give you the tools, how would that actually help you as you are faced with new ones coming every day? So the first thing that I've learned that I apply in my life, you guys, to the challenges that I've been faced with, is that you have to learn to tell the truth. So the stories that you continue to tell yourself in your head, they're just stories. They're not necessarily the reality of the situation, right? We typically will take the worst case scenario in a situation yet to have happened, and we will put ourselves down a road about why that conversation is going to go horrible, right? Or maybe we remember something in the past, and the story that we tell ourselves really isn't the truth. It's just the story that we want to take ownership of. It's so important for us to tell the truth of the situation that is ahead of us. And so once you're able to actually know the real story, then you can ask yourself the follow-up question is that what is the result that I want to experience from this story? What is the experience that I want to have from the truth of this story? What's the outcome that I want to have from facing my fear? See, when you're about to go do something amazing, you're going to have fear. You're going to have like this uncertainty. But what's the outcome that you want to experience? Because when you know the outcome, that's what helps you get the courage to go chase that outcome. Another thing that was so important, you guys, that I didn't learn until I was much older in my life, was that I needed to have really good people sitting at my table. You know, your teachers have probably told you this, your parents have told you this as well too, is that, you know, you show me your friends and I will show you who you're going to become. And those people sitting at your table, those are the people that you trust. Those are the people that have shown up in your life. Those are the people that if you really had a challenge, you could go to them and they're going to be honest with you. They're not going to necessarily tell you what you want to hear. They're going to actually tell you the truth of the situation that you're about to experience, or maybe the truth of the story that you're telling yourself. They love you so much that they're willing to tell you the truth, right? And so the reason why it's so important to go to those people, to find those people, right? Whether it's a teacher, whether it's a parent, whether it's a best friend, whether it's just a mentor, somebody in your life that you look up to, that you aspire to be. When you go to people like that, that truly care about you, as you're about to face this fear, as you're about to make that big decision, they're going to fill your cup. And you need your cup filled, because anytime that you face fear, you know that it's going to be hard, right? So you need your cup filled. And then the second thing about this is that as you face that fear, as you take that next step, as you attack that challenge, they're going to give you strength along the way. Because here's what's going to happen. As you do this, right, as you move forward and you say, yes, I'm going to attack this fear in my life, halfway through it, you're going to want to give up. 3/4 of the way through it, you're going to want to give up. When you're almost at the finish line, you're probably going to want to give up. And the people sitting at your table are the ones that are going to give you the strength and the encouragement to get through it. And the last thing that you need to do, you guys, once you've told the truth, once you've answered the questions, once you've found out who's sitting at your table and you've had them pour into you so that you have this strength and encouragement, is that you just have to do it. Right? I don't know if any of you guys are watching the Michael Jordan series on ESPN, and I'm absolutely loving it. For those of us that kind of grew up in that era, it has been so awesome to see, you know, really what was going on behind the scenes. Like, all we got to see was all the wonderful, amazing things that they were doing and the championships they were winning. But the reality of it is that they were faced with a lot of fear as an organization. They were faced with a lot of fear of the unknown, because at the time, you guys, they weren't champions. Michael Jordan wasn't the Michael Jordan. He was Mike Jordan, right? They were walking through the fear of the unknown. And we know, obviously, the outcome of everything that they accomplished. But you just got to do it. You just got to rip the Band-Aid off. You just got to commit to it. And you just have to go. It's so important in your life to take action. It's so important in your life to make sure that the things that you really want, that you're willing to go and step into it and face that fear. And in closing, I just want to say this. When you face your fear, you become this person that you've always desired to be. Not who you were meant to be, not who necessarily like everybody else wants you to be, but you start to become this person that you want to be. Because here's what I know, guys. The world needs who you've always wanted to be. Oh, look at that. I'm getting this. Okay, phone calls, everything, technology, you got to love it, right? The world needs exactly who you want to be. Now more than ever, show up for yourself, face your fears, and go become who you want to be.
Thanks, Josh. That's awesome. I recently learned this in a meeting, and I've been using it a lot, but the sign language for applause is this. And there are times that you just really feel like you want to give an applause and you like need that. So, you know, I'm introducing this across multiple platforms. Thank you. Awesome. Very good. One question we've been asking all of our speakers, because I think, you know, as youth are facing this as kind of their first big major life altering experience or event for many youth, and for many people at various points of their life, or certainly the largest chapter of impedance and newness, I'll say. Have you ever, and we'll ask Julie the same question, so Julie, you can be prepping, this is your preview, but have you ever felt like how the last 2 months have felt before this time? And if so, in what way that was similar? And if not, what feels different about this particular, you know, time frame?
Sure. Well, I will tell you this, you know, probably 3 years ago, if this would have happened to me 3 years ago, I would not have been as well equipped as I was now. You know, I used to, once again, I kind of was a victim of like life was happening to me, and all of the things that were in my past were happening because of my imperfections, or because I just wasn't strong enough to deal with everything. It wasn't until I really took that mindset of, if life is happening to me, what am I supposed to be getting out of this? Like, how is this going to be improving me through this? So I will tell you that through the last 8-9 weeks, we have felt like this is exactly what we've needed to do and to step into. Like, we felt like we were built for this. I really feel like every one of the challenges that we've been faced with as a company, I've been faced with as a man and as a leader, that everything was designed for us to step into this and to rise through this. So, but once again, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I would not have been prepared for this.
Yeah. And yeah, I think though, it's hard to know how to stay in that active and moving role, or in the driver's seat, when it feels like there's a lot of things outside of our control.
One thing that I would just say that to add to that, the one question that I continue to ask myself, and I continue to ask everybody else, especially when it comes to uncertainty, is how do you want to remember yourself through this? Mm-hmm. You know, because a lot of the times what happens is we might not react that way, and then we look back and we're like, man, I wish I'd have reacted so much different. I wish I'd have been so much stronger. I wish I would have done this, right? And so I think it's a really great daily reflection that we should be having is like, all right, so tomorrow's a new day. I feel like I didn't maybe react the way that I should have. How do I want to remember myself from this moment on? How do I want others to remember me from this moment on? So I think it's a powerful question that will help us as we continue to kind of walk through this uncertainty. And as you've said, like these changes and a lot of things that are out of our control, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard a few talks recently on history as well. And, you know, most often the people writing history don't know they're writing history. They think they're just living their life. But they end up doing something that's worth remembering or has an impact that has this legacy effect that somebody, you know, cares to write down and remember. And so I think we don't know which stories we're writing and that will be remembered in, you know, the history books of, maybe they won't be books, maybe they'll be, you know, history electronic memos. I'm sure there'll be a fancier word. Yeah, but we don't know what those things are happening, and very, very likely youth across the state are writing some of those chapters right now unknowingly, you know, because it's just the right thing to do, or they feel called to take action. I know, Josh, you have to go at 11:30 for another meeting. Is there anyone who wants to get a quick question in to Josh before he heads out? You can either type it in the chat window, or we have a small enough crew, we could also just unmute and you could ask it too if somebody has a question.
Yeah, I have a question. Usually with, like you were talking about fear and stuff, like usually the hardest part to conquer that is like the first few steps.
Yeah.
What are some of the best ways you found to get over those first few steps?
Yeah, great question. I think once again, you know, if you can just go back to like, what's the truth of the story? Like, what is the fear that you're facing, right? So let's say the fear is making that phone call, right? Maybe you need to call that friend you haven't talked to for a while, and you're just like, man, I'm seeing some of your posts on social media, and I'm really confused, and I don't, you know, let's just say you need to do it, right? So you gotta tell yourself the real story, right? Well, the real story of the situation might be like, man, maybe they're going through some really hardships, and maybe it's not personal, and maybe it's really not about me, it's more about them. And then as you tell yourself this truth, you're like, okay, what do I want out of this story? Like, what do I want out of this conversation? So do I want to just show up in their life, and do I want to be a support for them? Or is it about me? And do I need to make sure that I feel really good about myself as I have that conversation with them? So once you know what you want out of the situation, that helps you at least take that first initial step of dialing the number, right? Or pushing send on the phone, right? And it's just one little thing at a time too, by the way. It is just one little thing. Once you've identified it, that's literally the first step. I mean, understand, like, the first step doesn't actually have to be the conversation. The first step could actually just be the recognition of the true story that you need to tell yourself. Then the second step is actually figuring out what you want out of it. The third step is this. So you could really already be 4 or 5 steps into it before you've actually even had the conversation. So hopefully that gives you the encouragement that you're already building those blocks towards what your final accomplishment should be.
And I think I'll add to that, the more you wrestle or practice that process and experience, the more you know that when you get that kind of funny pit in your stomach of like, I don't want to do this, it's going to be not that fun. You know, like, okay, but the sooner I start taking steps towards what I know I need to do, the sooner that feeling sort of turns into productive feelings. Or it still might feel hard, and it still might feel sad or angry or a lot of things, but it's moving in a direction versus just like sitting in the pit of your stomach. And yeah, I think that's the like commit and go part, is it'll have less of a grip on you once you start doing something with it than just sitting with it.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Great question.
Awesome. Yeah, Hannah, great question. Okay, Josh, I know you have another meeting, so we'll send you off. Thank you for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. And thanks for sharing your story.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. You guys have a wonderful day.
Sounds great. We'll see you. Okay, and with that, we're going to sort of switch gears in a dynamic way, because we're going to go from sort of hearing about a philosophy of leadership and facing your fears, to hearing from Julie Tennant-Caine, who works for the Department of Corrections in Wyoming and is taking a leadership role and has had a leadership role through this entire process for prisons in Wyoming, and what that looks like here locally, and also the things we're hearing at the national level of, okay, they're letting prisoners out, or the entire prison has COVID-19. And so this will be a little bit more of just an informational gathering, and then we'll pick Julie's brain a little bit of how she's making decisions and getting good information. So if you have questions as we go, this is, I'll just say Julie is awesome, and you cannot ask a stupid question or something that she wouldn't be willing to answer. I say that, and there's probably a few, but in general, even if you just have any question you want to ask about how prison works or what's happening, I know it's not a subject many of us are experts in, or hopefully we're not too much of experts in. So ask questions in the chat window, and we'll leave a little bit of time at the end if people want to speak up too. So Julie, thanks for joining us.
Sure, thanks for the invitation. Can I just kind of piggyback on what Josh said before I jump into prison?
Sure.
So the question about how do you get started, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that the fear of the unknown is a lot worse than than knowing or finding out the reality. So we have a tendency sometimes to just awfulize a situation, trying to figure out what someone else is going to say, or what will the response be, or how will they react to me. And we make it far worse in our own minds than it is 99% of the time. So I think the more you stew about it, the worse it gets. So when you, like Mandy said, when you have that little feeling in your stomach, you got to act on that. That tells you that you're not going to be settled until you address it. So go for it. It can't be as bad as you've made it out to be. And the other thing is you don't have a control over anything but what you do and say. So, you put yourself out there, and then people respond to you in a very positive way when you do it in a positive way. So, just my thoughts about overcoming fear. So I am Julie Tennant-Caine, and I'm a deputy administrator in the Department of Corrections. And what that means is that I oversee all of the functions in all 5 of the prisons in Wyoming that don't have anything to do with security. So prisons are like little cities. And so we have certified teachers that provide educational courses. Of course, we have housing and classification, which is where we do a battery of tests with inmates to see how safe are they in prison and how safe were they out of prison and who can they live with. So we have to be really careful because everybody shares a room for the most part. So you got to be careful about who you put with whom. And then I oversee the training for our casework staff, and that's the institutional staff who work with the offenders every single day to try and get them to face the things and face the things that got them to prison and make better decisions so that when they get out, they're less likely to come back. I also oversee food services and religious services and reentry. So pretty much everything that you can think about in a small community is in prison. And so those are that's my responsibility, is those sections of prison. So let's jump right into COVID, because I know there's been a lot about it on the television, particularly. Excuse me. So I can tell you right now, there's no active COVID cases in any prison in the state of Wyoming. We have not had any inmates that have tested positive for the virus, which is awesome. We did have one staff person, and he's fully recovered, so we're doing good. That's not been the case across the nation, as you know. There's been some hot spots. Michigan is a hot spot, Ohio is a hot spot. So Louisiana right now is having some struggles. But here's kind of what happens in prison, and I want to try and have you guys put yourselves in the place of an inmate. So whatever brought you to prison, I don't care. That's not my job. That's not my role. I don't care. You're there. The court sent you. That's your punishment, is to come to prison. It's not my job. It's not our job to make that worse for you. It's our role to try and get you to make better decisions or give you tools to do that. So here you come to prison. We tell you what to wear. We tell you which side of the hallway to walk on. We tell you when you can eat. We tell you where to sleep. We tell you who you get to sleep in the same room with. We tell you what kinds of programming you're going to need to take. We actually tell you what food you're going to eat. So you pretty much lose most of the control over your life. So then imagine that you're in this place that you can't get out of, and there's this deadly virus that's going around the world, and you don't have any input on how you're going to react or what's going to happen to you as a result of that deadly virus. And that creates a lot of fear, like Josh was just talking about. So one of the things that we decided early on in this was that we needed the input and the participation of our inmates in what we did with this, in our response to the virus. So we have inmate panels at every single one of the prisons, and the wardens meet with them every single week before they come to a meeting that we have as administrative staff to make decisions about what we're going to do and how we're going to take the next step. And so what's happened in our prison is we've had to identify places that we will quarantine inmates who show signs of the virus. And then we have to separate a different place for people who actually test positive for the virus and have to be isolated. Now, if you can imagine, there's no social distancing in prison, okay? You just don't get to do that. We've done the best we can. For example, most of our dining halls are 4-person like picnic tables, and we've limited that to 2 per table instead of 4. We've tried to keep them 6 feet apart walking down the hallways, things of that nature. But there could be as many as 72 men living in the same housing unit. And every couple of them share the same living space or the same bedroom space, which is about 100 square feet for the 2 of them. So you have to be really cautious about that. The inmates have been extremely helpful in the things that they think we should be doing. And they watch TV, so they know what the CDC is recommending or what's not working in other places and what would work in our place. So one of the things I can tell you that I'm really proud of is when we went to wearing masks, and staff and inmates wear masks all day long, the inmates made the masks for the staff and for themselves. And we put 3 shifts of inmates working in 3 of our prisons. So we've got them running 24/7, sorry. And in about a week, they created over 5,000 masks. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive when you think about you've got maybe 15 people total that are doing that kind of work. And they've been really forthcoming with information. If somebody gets sick, they're right there. The one issue we've run into is the testing. And I don't know if you've heard about how this testing goes, but it's pretty invasive and it's pretty awful. And it's a nasal swab that they put clear up into your brain cavity. I read an article the other day that said if you measure the distance between your nostril and the opening of your ear, that's about how far it goes up your nasal canal to take the sample. And I read an article today that said they have a new test that they can do a buccal swab. So that's a better deal. So we have had some inmates that have been a little resistive to saying that they have a fever, because that's like the big thing that kicks off the test. There's a variety, as you all know, of symptoms, and it seems like there's more every day. We had 4 to begin with. If you have you been around somebody? Do you have a fever? Do you have a cough? And the other one escapes me right this second. But now we're up to like 15. Do you have body aches? Do you know? And then we have the case where lots of people are testing positive but have no symptoms. So it's just all over the board, and it is a scary kind of time. But we created a plan that addresses how did we implement all of the things that we had to do: cleaning, gowns, the isolation units, the quarantine units. How is staff going to react? How are we going to do chow or feeding of inmates? So, and if you can imagine, we have one plan that has to fit into 5 facilities that all have different physical plants, and they all have different custody levels of inmates. So you have to be really conscious of all of those things when you're building that kind of plan. And now we're in the process of building the step-down plan in the event that we ever get over this. But I can tell you, sitting in on the governor's briefings every other day, we opened up a lot of our community stuff across the nation, And you can just see the hot spots coming back. And so it's my personal belief that we're not out of the woods with this. It is a scary time. People are losing jobs. We're not able to have businesses open. That's touched my family personally, but at the same time, it is a health issue. So several states released inmates who are lower custody or nearing the end of their sentences. And they did that for a couple of reasons. Number one, they have a lot more inmates than we do. We have about 2,500 in our state total, as opposed to like California with 40,000, Texas with 60,000. So, that's apples and oranges in comparison. But they had community services that were available to those inmates that were being released. That's not something we have in Wyoming. You can't just have somebody walk down 3 or 4 blocks to the local clinic and be able to be served. So the other reason that Wyoming chose not to release inmates is because we don't have first of all, we can't legally. There's that little thing called the law that prevents that. So, but we don't have the community capacity to manage, but we do have the capacity in our own facilities with our medical providers to provide great medical care. So actually, if someone gets sick, they'll probably get better treatment in prison right now than they would get out of prison. So that's why we chose to not, one of the reasons we chose not to release any of the inmates. And we got some kickback from communities, of course. We have moms that would write or call and be very worried about their child who's in prison and how are we going to keep them safe. And, we just have to tell them these are all of the things that we're doing. This is the rate of infection we've had so far, so we've been very lucky. But at the end of the day, we're not going to let anybody go not just, this is pretty awful, but we're not going to let anybody go as a result of the virus. So one of the other things I want you to sort of do a comparison to is nursing homes. And we've seen a huge blow up in the amount of patients in nursing homes who are really struggling or dying. And the prisons are the same way in that you have that, all those people in a congested area, for example. One of our institutions in Torrington is where we have all of our specialized medical units. So we have an infirmary, we have a geriatric unit, we have a specialized unit for women who are either very ill or when they're getting ready to have a baby, they come stay in Torrington as well. And so that's probably our unit that has the biggest risk factors. And so we've done some extra things to try and keep particularly the infirmary patients and the geriatric patients away from the other general population. So it's interesting. I love this kind of work. I can honestly tell you in all my life, and I've been in the criminal justice system nearly 40 years at this point, I only know one person that ever grew up and said, hey, I want to work in prison when I get to be an adult. Most of us just found our way here through various means. I was a police officer for quite a while, and so it just seems kind of a natural progression for me, but it's good work. It's hard work. I mean, whatever you watched on TV, pay no attention to that. There's none of it that's real. You can't solve a crime in 53 minutes. We don't have all the fancy equipment that the world owns. People can't afford that. So, there are a few inmates that would meet the description of some of them that you put on TV, but for the most part, they're just folks. And they made some bad decisions, and they are where they are as a result of those decisions. I could tell you over 70% of our population has a substance use disorder. So that's a huge issue for us, is the treatment aspect for substance use. But it's good work. It's fulfilling work. You get to see people's lights come on and see that they've actually, they got it. Something is different today than it was yesterday. So anyway, I probably could talk about prison forever. That's probably enough, Mandy. So is there anything else you wanted to know? Or?
That was awesome. Thanks for giving us even just the 101 of you're building many communities and you're managing it within this confined space. You can't just send an inmate to the grocery store if they run out of toilet paper. Exactly. All of those pieces have to be contained within your ecosystem. Maybe we'll just kick off with the same question that we've been asking every speaker. And then if youth have questions, you can type them in the chat, or you can raise your hand too and come on video and ask it as well. But you said you've been in this career or in this, line of work for 40 years, and you probably dealt with a lot of emergencies and frontline care and different situations. And so how does this feel like something you've managed, or what would you compare it to or not compare it to in your own life?
So I don't know that I could compare this really to anything. It's very different. And I think the thing that makes it the most different for me is the unknown, like we were talking about fear. And and there's so much information, right? There's information overload coming from everywhere. Some of it's valuable information, some of it is not. Sorting through all of that, frankly, some days just shutting it out so you can find yourself again in all of this mess is important. I have not been through something like this before in my life, and it's been very interesting because I supervise a variety of staff as well. I have them from age 26 to 67. And so you can imagine that there's a variety of differences in what they need and what's important to them and how I can best support them through all of this stuff. We have young mothers. I have folks that are older than me that have health issues so it's really been challenging to try and make sure that I'm present and available and supportive while still trying to maintain some level of productivity. So on the personal end of things, I'm the mother of 4 daughters and 9 grandchildren. They're my reward for not killing my daughters when they were younger. So, but it's been interesting to watch them. One set of my family, one daughter is doing just fine. They pretty much live, the 4 of them, on their own anyway. So this really hasn't been a big deal, except the kids don't go to school. Otherwise, everything is pretty normal and status quo for them. I have another daughter who is very outgoing and very involved in the community, and home is really just a place to touch base. And so now for her to not be working and to also be homeschooling has been a huge change. And she's also very social, so not being around her friends has been kind of a struggle for her too. And then the other 2 are somewhere in between. I have one daughter that works for Facebook and lives in South Carolina, and they've been working from home since March 1st, and they just got notified that they'll be working from home for the rest of the calendar year. She has a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. So yeah, it's pretty eventful at their house. So that's been really interesting just to watch, how my family has responded to this. My husband is a nurse, so that creates a little element of stress for us too, because he's still going into the hospital to work every day. And our lives have adjusted in that way, because when he comes home from work, he takes his shoes off, shoes and coat and stuff in the garage. Then he comes into the back of our house, which there's a door between the laundry room and the rest of the house. So he'll come into the garage. I've closed the laundry room door. He takes off all of his uniform, throws it in the laundry, and then he goes immediately to the shower before I ever see him. So just, small differences like that. But overall, it's been strange, but at the same time, it's also been good, because it forces you to think about what kind of time you're spending, and do you want that to be valuable time? The time that you have with your family. I don't have little kids in my house right now, which is probably the reason that I don't feel so stressed about, being home and isolated. I think if my kids were home, it would be completely different. So, but it has been different. It's been fun only in the ways that we were talking about at the beginning, is that the use of technology has improved. You said it might have improved. It hasn't necessarily improved our efficiency. And I was sitting here with both of these and the computer as you were saying that, and they're all on, and I'm thinking, boy, you aren't kidding.
That's awesome. Michelle, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. First of all, thank you.
Sure.
Super interesting to learn about this. And so, it's something that is just not in the public eye so much.
Right.
So it's really invisible to a lot of us in Wyoming. And I think it was very interesting to have this follow-up from Josh's conversation about fear. It struck me, you said it's easier to not awfulize. I always use catastrophize.
Oh, good.
When you have more information, right? And you're well informed. So rather than go somewhere in your mind with it all, you're directing it and you're making informed decisions. And then you said you had sort of the personal belief that we're not quite through it yet. And I'm just wondering, I know in our community, there's just a lot of differing opinions and I try to ignore a lot of the national news because, to be honest, it's irrelevant to so many of us here. But I know that there are protests and, people upset that they need to wear masks in public, things like that. So I'm wondering with that belief and being a leader, how do you deal with pushback, both from inmates and from other people in leadership positions in your organization?
That's a great question because it's happening. We have some of our staff that think this is craziness that we're acting this way because they compare it to a flu year, which is, in my opinion, a false comparison. We've had 85,000 deaths in about 3 months from COVID, and the length of the flu season is an entire 12 months. So those are really not even comparable things for me. And this is what I tell pretty much everyone. We have a responsibility to be careful and to be cautious. And until we know better, this is the best that we can do, and this is what we are expected to do, and we'll continue to do it. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's unfortunate. Yes, it's uncomfortable. I mean, I don't like wearing a mask all day long. It really is uncomfortable, especially when you have to walk up and down stairs and you're old, because then you got to, so, but we just try and talk about how important it is to be safe, that we don't have all the answers, that until we do have better answers, this is the best that we can do, and we're following the guidance of science, and we hope that the scientists know better than I do about how we manage this.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Any youth have a question? Anything about prison or COVID or leadership or fear or uncertainty? Anyone have anything?
Employment? Anybody want to come to work in prison?
Yeah, Julie's always hiring.
I am.
So spread the word.
I'm always recruiting too. So
yeah.
20-year retirement. It's a good deal. Something new every day.
There you go. You could be retired in 20 years. That sounds pretty good right now.
Sean smiled. I love it.
That's awesome. Okay.